Hey, welcome to the Ministry Mix podcast, where we're bringing you real conversations for the souls and strategies of ministry leaders. I'm Phil Gifford, and I'll be joined by the one and only my co-host, Richard Pope.
Hello.
Whether you're a senior pastor or a ministry leader or just stepping into your first leadership role, this podcast is here where we'll share stories, we'll share insights, practical tips to help you lead strategically while still caring for your soul. And so each week we are diving into topics that hopefully are conversations you're having with others or conversations you wish you could have with others to help you learn and equip you for your leadership. So today, we're going to be thinking about what we need to be speaking and saying to our leaders. Like, are you saying to your leaders what they need to hear from you?
Yeah, specifically, we're going to dive into leadership ideas or phrases or these ideas, these things that the people who are under you need to hear from you for you to lead them well, but also to care for their soul. The goal in ministry leadership is not just to get people to do things. It's people aren't doers alone. They're also becomers that are becoming more like Jesus, especially the people you're leading. Before we jump into the 6 things, I would love to share this quote. Eugene Peterson once said that souls can't be hurried. And the job of a pastor or a ministry leader is to help souls along in the work God's doing in their life. But there's specific things that you should say to the people you lead, and also that they should be saying to people they lead if you're a leader of leaders. So we're going to be diving in. One thing that we want to point out is that you're probably going to lean towards a couple of these and neglect a few. I'm willing to bet that as you hear this, you'll say, I do that already. I don't need to hear that, Richard. Here's the thing. You probably do some of them, but I know just looking at what me and Phil put together, what we've compiled from our own ministry experience, I neglect a few of these, and I'm sure Phil probably does as well. So Phil, you want to get us started?
I neglect nothing. No.
Phil is perfect.
Absolutely.
But not Jesus.
Not Jesus, not even close. No, I think that's such a good word, because anytime there's a list, if your first word is like, I do that already, you almost shut off everything else. But you are not the perfect package of leadership. And so,
and if you are, you can have our podcast.
Absolutely. You should be on this podcast, and we should be learning from you for sure. Hey, before I jump into our first thing, I do want to remind you, if this is helpful to you, subscribe and leave us a review, and also join us on social media. Join our Ministry Mix group and follow along, so that way you can stay connected to the community. And if there's conversations you want to have, comment, let us know, so we can dive into topics that are really, they're on your minds and you're passionate about them. So our first thing of the 6 things that you should be telling to your people is, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You need to be telling your people and apologizing to your people and take that posture of humility. I think that's one of the most important things, especially in our leadership culture of today. There tends to be this arrogant, leaning, almost I'm always right culture that I don't really know that it's always present in the secular world. I'm sure it is, but I see it creeping into churches a lot more, that the pastor and the top leader has to always be right. And even if they're wrong, well, it's just the execution of their rightness or whatever it is. Like, it's hard to say I'm sorry, but I think the people we lead need to hear I'm sorry. And I think James 5:16 talks about just even confessing our sins to one another. Like, leaders need to be the first ones to confess where they've fallen short, where they have not even just sinned, but even just like fallen short in leadership. It's funny that we kind of like randomly picked these to talk about, but even just yesterday, I was on a ministry call with somebody in our church, and they were sharing. It was a really great call, so nothing overly negative in that sense, but just sharing about how there were some frustrations about maybe some communication gaps, feeling a little bit left in the dark and just not clearly communicated with. And the phrase was undervalued. Like, the way I was communicating with this person just made them feel a little bit undervalued. And, as a leader and a type A person, my first gut is to justify why we did this, how we did this, and like argue, well, that experience is silly, right? But you have to push that down, because my first words were, I'm so sorry. That you shouldn't have experienced that. That's a gap on our part. And so I did my best to, I tried to, explain the situation, obviously, and kind of pointed to the big picture, but I'm sorry was absolutely necessary in that moment.
Wow.
What do you think happens as, Richard, let me pivot to that. What happens in our people when they hear us say, I'm sorry?
Yeah, I know for me, I'm a little bit younger than Phil. He could be my father. Not actually. I'm a little bit younger than Phil. So I've only been in a lead pastoring role for the last 3.5 years. And I've served under really, really great pastors. and some pastors who maybe weren't as great as they thought they were. And I say that not critically. The difference for me serving under other, pastors or ministry leaders, a leader who was humble and would, apologize, I just naturally respected them more, but wanted to follow them more. For me, if somebody said sorry to me when they were leading me, what that really did in my heart was increase trust and increase dedication. Like, I wanted to serve you because you were humble. On the flip side, what do you think happens when a leader doesn't say sorry? I think they run people over with a bus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really do believe there are certain tiers of leadership. You will not attract top tier leaders if you do not learn to say I'm sorry and admit when you're wrong and pivot and show the humility. You might attract a bunch of doers and like second or third tier leaders. And I don't mean to like make anybody feel bad about the tier they're on, but strongest leaders want to lead with somebody who's transparent, authentic, and realizes when they're wrong.
Yeah. I agree.
So yeah, find a way to say you're sorry, even if it wasn't even your fault. Like I'm sure that there's always multiple layers of blame and struggle, but if someone's experiencing pain or difficulty from your leadership, own it and apologize.
Yeah. Hey, the next thing that we think you should be saying to the people you lead is that your work is more important than you think it is. My church is unique in the fact that about a third of our congregation, including members, are homeless individuals. And there's this couple, they get out of the homeless shelter every Sunday morning at 7 a.m., walk about a mile to our church building, and they serve on our hospitality team, making coffee, serving coffee. And I was watching them this last Sunday just run around. I'm like, man, these people are working so hard to serve the young professionals, the hipsters, the wealthier people who come to my church, and they probably have the least. So I was talking to the husband who we just recently baptized, and I was like, man, what you're doing is incredible. Like, this is awesome. And he said something that I think a lot of people we lead often feel. He said, oh, I'm not doing something that big. He said, you're the one preaching. And in that moment, I realized that maybe in my own leadership, I actually said sorry, by the way, Phil.
Look at that.
I realized in my own leadership, have I elevated what I do above what he does? And maybe it's a personal thing for him, but we started talking, and I really do believe that the kingdom of God grows from faithful, simple acts of obedience. That coffee that they're serving to that first-time visitor with a smile, that could be so powerful. They might decide that this church is friendly before they ever hear a sermon from Richard. So, I would encourage you to find ways regularly to encourage those who do the things in your church that are less impressive. They're stage leaders and non-stage leaders. Mm-hmm. Find the person who puts out the connect cards every week and tell them how important their role is. Because a lot of times I think, especially for us in lead pastor roles, it can seem like we have the important job. Everyone else just helps us. But quite honestly,
you're the opening act and I'm the main band that everyone came to see.
Yeah. I'm not Linkin Park, right? That's a non-Christian band. I'm sorry. I'm not the Newsboys. Is that a band? Yeah. Casting Crowns?
Maybe.
Casting Crowns is just the Nickelback of Christian music. But
okay, that's a podcast episode.
All that to say, tell the people that you lead how important their work is, because they might not believe it if you don't tell them.
That's really good. I can't remember where I saw the statistic, but people make a decision about a church within the first, I want to say, was it like either 30 seconds or 2 minutes that people have already decided what they feel about your church?
Either way before they hear you preach.
Yeah, way before they hear you preach. Probably before your band and they're all flashy whatever starts playing. Like, they decide about your church. And what that means, it's your greeting team.
Yep.
It's your setup team. Yep. It's your environment. It's your hospitality. It's, a kingdom smile.
It's your parkers.
Your people that are doing parking, your waivers, whatever you've got at your church. So just finding ways to point people to the greater kingdom impact.
Yeah.
If you're holding babies in the nursery, you're not just holding babies in the nursery.
Right.
You are preparing, you are allowing parents to be fully invested in learning the gospel and their kids to be fully loved and trusted. And so, each layer of the church, no matter how big or small, it's more important than it as kingdom value.
Yeah.
Well, hey, the third thing is encouragement. You need to tell your people you are doing a good job. And I feel like encouragement for leaders, there's a danger in assuming that they know we think they're doing a good job. Like, we assume a lot about encouragement. I think within the family, within leaders, like, we assume they know we value them and they're doing a good job. And I just don't think that is. And one of the verses that pops in my mind is Hebrews 3, where it talks about, let's encourage one another while it's called today, so that we don't fall into the trap of sin's deceitfulness. That when you operate under an environment where encouragement is starved, it can allow sin to creep in, discouragement to creep in, and bitterness to creep in. And so I think the reason why the Hebrews author says to encourage people today, it's because encouragement should be in the moment. It should be regular. It shouldn't be saved up for a special, our ministry, we celebrate our leaders once a year. We do a banquet and we write them all encouragement cards. And so I don't think that should be how we encourage. That should not be the primary form of encouragement and a once a year banquet honoring the volunteers in your church or those that you lead. This should be regular and strategic and a habit. So you need to tell them you're doing a good job and encourage them whenever you can.
Yeah, something we started doing at Canvas recently because of a conversation we had, fun fact.
There we go, ministry mix.
Yeah, every week at Flow, which is like our weekly staff meeting, we have 6 people on staff, counting me. Everybody has to say this is one person that we should thank for what they did yesterday on Sunday. And we've seen so much fruit just from, every week we pick 6 people. Hey, great job doing blank. We really appreciate what you do here. You're doing a great job.
Oh, and I would even add, we should make it specific.
Yeah, very specific.
We for the simplicity of this list, saying you're doing a good job is what we're saying, but you need to do more than just say you're doing a good job. You need to show how they're doing a good job. With your greeters, I love the way your smile is infectious as people come to the door. I love the way that your warmth just brings people in. For your nursery workers, I love the way that you just so sacrificially care for those babies. Don't just say you're doing a good job, but connect it to the specific things they're doing.
Yeah.
And especially if you have values in your church, connect the encouragement to the values.
That's good. That's good. Hey, another thing we think you should say, and this one might be harder if you're a conflict avoidant person. I am not, is you need to improve in blank. Again, you need to be specific here. Don't walk around your church. You need to improve.
Do you do that?
No, I haven't, but I've thought about it. I'm kidding. Canvas, I love you. But yeah, having those moments where you say, hey, this is something that you're not doing great in. Because 2 things. One, if their work matters, which we just said a couple points ago, if their work matters, then the excellency they pursue in doing it matters. Mm-hmm. If their work doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter how well they do. But I do think if you're going to tell someone that what they do matters or it's more important, then we should also encourage and build them up to a higher place. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 12, it says that the role of the minister, the teacher, is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, to build up the body of Christ. I think part of equipping is those moments of graceful critique. So, that's not walking up to somebody and saying, hey, you need to be better at the way you look, right? We're not talking about things like that.
Which you've told me.
I actually have. Phil needs to be more Gen Z like me. But it's things like this. We have a leader in our church. Dude's killing it. I could say his name and he wouldn't be offended. This is a conversation we've been having. He's probably going to plant a church. He leads our connection ministries. He's just incredibly gifted. But the thing that I love about him is if I am scarce in my equipping, hey bro, this is what you could do better, he'll come to me and be like, hey, can you write down a few things I did bad this week? And I actually was kind of put off by that at first. I'm like, does this guy is this a weird false humility? And I finally said, dude, is this do you really want this? And he said something to me that was so wise. His name's Andrew. He said, if you don't help me get better, then I'm just going to get stagnant. And that stuck out to me. And I was like, man, so I have this brother and now it's every week I know he wants me to give him one thing. And what's crazy is if you are kind to your people and grace-filled and you make it clear, I'm not saying this to you because there's a bar you'll never reach. I'm saying this to you because I believe in your full potential as a child of God, redeemed by the blood of Jesus, and I want to see you walk in that full potential. I think what ends up happening is it builds trust. Now, I will warn, Phil, and maybe you've experienced this, when you start giving your leaders grace-filled critique, they're going to start doing it right back up.
I was just about to ask that. This should be a two-way street,
Crap
right?
does not only roll downhill.
It needs to be 2 ways.
Yeah, and I've grown as a leader, and I think our culture as a staff and as a leadership team, volunteer, lay, and staff at my church has grown from this confrontation heavy willingness to just say, hey, you need to do better at that.
Yeah, and a lot of times I really do think that our ministry development is either there's pockets of complacency that we just need someone to nudge us, or there's just a blind spot. I don't know what I need to do. And so how do people, it's hard for me to evaluate how people experience my preaching.
Right.
But they certainly have an opinion about it. And so being open to that and leading through that is so good. I often tell one of our standards for leadership is I'm rare to put somebody in a leadership position until I have confronted them on something.
Yeah.
And they've confronted me on something. Because like I really like to see that as a test. Like, how does somebody handle when I say, hey, you need to improve in X, Y, and Z, or you need to fix this, or you need to think about this? Because honestly, that reveals your heart and their heart far more than many of these other things.
Yeah, I agree.
So the fifth thing is more of a kind of piggybacks off of this critique, because I don't think we should tell people to just go and improve. I think we also need to coach them. And so our fifth thought that you should say to your people is, have you thought about blank? We want to give them strategic coaching and ideas to help them grow in their leadership. So not only are you confronting them with areas of growth, but you also want to help stir them to think about growth. And this is a little bit less confrontational, but it's more coaching. Have you thought about X, Y, and Z? And so for me, it's just coming alongside a ministry leader and not necessarily giving them the answer, but giving them space to think about their ministry.
Yeah.
So I think about Jethro and Moses, and if Jethro is a little bit probably more aggressive than this illustration is, but Jethro shows up at the camp with Moses, and Moses is dying trying to care and administer and lead this group of people, and he goes, what you're doing is not good.
Yeah.
And he helps him strategically break up the people of Israel so that everybody's happy and everybody's cared for. So coaching your people is so key for their growth. And if you can develop them, man, they'll just be, not only will they be more fruitful, but they'll be just more unified with you as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the sixth thing, and this really could have been the first thing, I would argue that this might be the most important of the six things. Specifically, I would argue the other five come out of this one.
This is foundational.
So this is the sixth one, and it's going to be groundbreaking, and you've never heard this before, guys. Drum roll. You should tell your people, I love you. I think of Jesus' words in John chapter 13, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. But then he says this, by this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. One of the things that I've found, working with church planters, not every church planter starts planting a church because they feel a calling. Some church planters have a really bad ministry experience, and either they get fired or they quit or they feel like it was toxic. And there's two sides to every story. But a lot of times these young pastors, my age, a little bit older now, also a little bit younger, there's this feeling of, I just wish that my pastor loved me. I wish he cared about me. And then ministry leaders loved people, are kind people, loved people, are healthier people, loved people, are more Jesus-y people. One of the conversations we have often at our church, and it's just it's a thermometer, it's a temperature check for us, is do our people feel loved by the way I lead? And we give our people room to say if they don't. Friends, I would just encourage you, if you're people you're leading, whether you're a deacon or a team leader or a staff member or a pastor or a lay pastor, whatever your role is, or if you're just a human being who loves Jesus, if people don't feel loved by you, your words matter so much less to them. And we're made relationally, right? That's a pretty basic foundational truth of the scriptures. We're made for relationship with God, but we live out that relationship with God often with each other and how we care for one another. So if Jesus said that you'll know that we're a disciple by the way we love each other, how much more should those of us in ministry leadership love the people serving in the trenches and front lines with us well?
That's so good. I know it can be awkward to tell somebody you love them, like particularly if you're not an overly affectionate person.
Or dude to dude.
In
our culture, it's weird.
Yeah, so I think there's two layers here. When you affirm your love for somebody you're leading, there are the words that you say, but there's also the experience they have.
Yeah.
Just how do you think that our people, along with our words, experience love from their leaders?
Yeah. I think words are great, right? It's the classic Facebook breakup post. Actions speak louder than words.
Yep.
If you say I love you with a clenched fist raised at them, that's not love. Phil, I'm sure you've had this experience. Talking with a woman who has a unhealthy or toxic boyfriend, husband, etc., who might be abusive. One of the things that happens is this thing, they call it love bombing. In other words, you do something narcissistic or toxic or unhealthy, and then you follow it up with love. I say that to say this: if your people are told that you love them, but in between those moments of love is just hurt, ignoring them, or you're too busy for that. Like all these different relational hurts, that love isn't going to mean much. So it's not just loving them with your words, it's showing up for them. You know, we as our church has grown, we've shifted how our church structured a little bit. So I directly oversee our worship ministry still, but really I spend my time with our leaders. I've tried to show up for my leaders in my church, because those are my primary people I pastor as our church has grown. And, you know, it's amazing showing up at a birthday party for a leader in my church's kid will have just as much of an impact, if not more, than me telling them I love them, because all of a sudden that love became visible. It's like Richard went out of his way to be with us. Also, this is going to sound so tacky, but small gifts, right? If it's a particularly stressful week, especially for my staff, you know the Sundays where there's church, there's an event, there's a members meeting, there's 3 outreaches, like those weeks where you're just like, who did the calendar? Oh, I did the calendar. Going and getting Rise Up, or that's a coffee shop by us, or Starbucks gift cards, and just saying, hey, I know you're working hard and I value you and I love you and I'm thankful. Just do this and bless yourself. Just small things.
Learning their stories, showing up in their lives, finding ways to express that. No, it's really good. I think that is one of the most critical things, because if you're leading people, if you're trying to lead them without love, I mean, at some level it feels more like exploitation. Like you are using them as a means toward your leadership. And if you don't love the people you're leading, you are literally just exploiting them for what they can give you. They have to experience love for you, and they have to hear that from you.
Wow.
You know, as we wrap this up, I think one of the questions I would ask, and maybe we can pitch this around a little bit, is of those 6 questions, what is the one you feel like you are most likely to ignore?
Wow.
Because I think that our listeners should be thinking that too. There's the ones I'm good at,
right,
but what are the ones that you're probably neglecting?
You want me to answer?
I mean, that's safer than me answering.
I think the one that I struggle with the most is the have you thought about. It's very easy for me to...
You're a directive guy.
Right. So I'm like, oh, this needs to be better. But I don't always follow that up with coaching, which the problem is if I critique, even gracefully, often without any follow-up or care, it can become this like transactional, like I have to perform for Richard's level. So I've been working on it. I've also put some systems in place that help, like monthly one-on-one coaching with my staff. All of our pastors who have volunteers under them do a quarterly one-on-one coaching.
That's good.
So creating space for it, because we're not always going to remember to do the right thing. And I'd actually say that for all 6 of these, Phil. Create space in your calendar to do these things. Like if you have a monthly staff meeting or a monthly leaders meeting, every 3 months, go do something fun with them just to tell them you love them. Like create space in your calendar for it's not reliant on you remembering. Because I don't know about you, but I can't even remember what day it is half the time.
Yep. No, I feel that. I think for me, the easiest ones I think are the encouragement and the apologies. I'm saying I'm sorry. There's a lot that I can apologize for. Like I don't have to think too hard. I don't have to think hard about that one. But I do think that I'm not necessarily not a confrontational person, but my default is not just like, I almost make it too big of a deal. Like I want to set up a one-on-one meeting. I want to go to lunch. I want to kind of you almost try to make it so special that I don't always bring that you need to approve in conversations in the moment when it really matters.
Yeah.
And so learning how to do that, and I'm not a mean person. Like I could do it grace-filled, but my first instinct is like, oh, we'll talk about that later. Right. And sometimes that later never comes. So being more intentional to really jump into the you need to improve in this. This was not good. Sometimes that's, oh, you're a volunteer. I get it. But they need to hear that critique. So for me, those are the ones I'm working on, is that immediate grace-filled critique. Yeah. And so, hey, if you're listening, who is somebody in your ministry today that you need to go talk with? Maybe say one of those 6 things. Take this, apply it to how you lead your leaders, and let's just watch people flourish under your ministry as they know that they're loved, they're grown, and they're valued and connected to the great kingdom work they're doing.
Amen. I want to go farther. Let's challenge them.
Oh, here we go.
This week, pick somebody, say the thing.
Pick somebody, say the thing. Hey, if this episode's been helpful to you, make sure you subscribe, make sure you review, and also follow us on social media, because we're taking some of the content, some of the quotes and key ideas from these episodes and just reminding you through our social media avenues. So hope this has been helpful, bringing you a real conversation about your leadership that will help your strategies and your soul as a ministry leader. We'll see you guys next episode.
Bye.